Now, if that doesn't work, that's typically when they go scorched earth and they go straight to extortion. And they say, listen, I'm in your environment, I've stolen your data, or I have access to this data that you wouldn't want to see leaked out into the public, and pay me or else. And so that's the most dangerous scenario. That's when things get the most high risk. And I would say if you were going to say what's the biggest threat facing, bookkeeping businesses today, it's ransomware.
You're listening to The Successful Bookkeeper with your host, Michael Palmer. Listen each week as inspiring guests share their secrets of success to help you increase your confidence, work smarter, and build a business you love. This episode of The Successful Bookkeeper is brought to you by PureBookkeeping.com, the proven system to grow your bookkeeping business.
Welcome back to the Successful Bookkeeper podcast. I'm your host, Michael Palmer, and today's show is going to be a very important one. Our guest is a cybersecurity expert, founder, and CEO of Entoo Security, Nick Mullen. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Michael. Glad to be here.
It's great to have you. Now, cybersecurity, I'm sure the ears of our listener has perked up and they're afraid because cybersecurity is just such a big word. And I'm sure many of our listeners would know what that's all about, but I would imagine many don't. And I'd love to hear your backstory. How did you end up doing what you're doing today, and help our listener get to know you a little bit before we get into what we should be thinking about cybersecurity these days?
Yeah, I appreciate that. So I've been in the technology space for almost 2 decades now, mostly in the financial services sector. So my background is in security and project management. So I've been doing that at Fortune 50 companies, Fortune nothings, and pretty much everything in between. About 3.5 years ago, I started a consulting firm, and it was just me, focused on helping small, mid-sized businesses with security problems. And then late last year, I organized a new entity, Entoo Security, with a couple partners, where we are focused on this space specifically. So accounting, tax, bookkeeping, and credit union cybersecurity.
Interesting. Very, very interesting. And I guess this is, your business is growing. This must be a going concern. This is something people should be concerned about. What are the biggest cybersecurity threats that face the bookkeeping businesses today?
Without question, it's going to be ransomware. That's the biggest threat that almost every industry is facing right now. Ransomware has basically turned into a business in itself. And you have these ransomware gangs, which is basically just your modern day organized crime. They're operating on a global scale, and they're targeting, businesses in every demographic and every size. So you have small businesses that are being targeted, sole proprietorships that are being targeted, all the way up to the federal government that's being targeted. But you look at the threat landscape. Technology is changing so fast that new threats are evolving every day, and it's very difficult for us. I'm categorizing us as, myself, you, the listeners, the good guys, the folks that are on the right side of the law. It's hard for us to keep up. But yeah, ransomware is the biggest threat. Ultimately, that's what gets a lot of these criminal organizations paid, because that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to make money, and they're going to do it any way that they can. And so typically they look through, one of about 3 different avenues to extract that money. The first one is, if they can just get into your environment and steal it, they will. Like that's easiest thing to do, is just for them to go in, never talk to anybody, you never know that they were there, and they just come in and they steal your money. If they can't do that, then they're going to try and trick you into giving them the money. And this is a lot of the scams that you see out there where, a criminal organization or some sort of, bad actor will impersonate someone else, or they'll send you a link saying that it's something that it's not, and they're going to try and trick you into giving your financial details so they can extract some funds from you. Now, if that doesn't work, that's typically when they go scorched earth and they go straight to extortion. And they say, listen, I'm in your environment, I've stolen your data, or I have access to this data that you wouldn't want to see leaked out into the public, and pay me or else. And so that's the most dangerous scenario. That's when things get the most high risk. And I would say, if you were going to say what's the biggest threat facing, bookkeeping businesses today, it's ransomware.
We'll get back to the interview right after this word from our sponsor.
Fellow bookkeepers, listen up. If you haven't heard, you're invited to Bill's Bookkeeper Appreciation Week. The team at Bill knows bookkeepers keep businesses running and wants to give them the recognition they deserve. Trust me, you want to check this out. Bill is the all-in-one platform for creating and paying bills, sending invoices, managing expenses, and controlling budgets. And it's designed to help bookkeepers succeed and grow, whether you have your own bookkeeping firm or you're a bookkeeper at an accounting firm. And the week of April 14th, Bill's Bookkeeper Appreciation Week will feature 5 days of essential online resources delivered directly to your inbox, plus live webinars, giveaways, and more. Throughout the week, Bill will cover hot topics like technology, pricing, growth, and the future of bookkeeping. Registration is free, and you could even win a $500 gift card just for attending a webinar. So don't wait. Be a part of the celebration with Bill's Bookkeeper Appreciation Week. Register today for free at bill.com/successful bookkeeper, and let your fellow bookkeepers know about this too. That's bill.com/successful bookkeeper.
Thank you for hearing from our sponsor. Now let's get back to the interview. Wow. So I've heard of, lots of fraud. In the second component, or the second example that you gave, where impersonate somebody else, some tricks as well. We had a guest on the show. They had a trick of almost like a shell game. I sent you this, so can you refund that? All of a sudden they're out like a lot of money. And then the one where it's impersonating somebody else, you didn't, but it was really an interesting one because they knew all the names involved. So it must have been an inside job where it's like you owe this money, or this is past due, or it's due, and same name of the people, but different emails and a different bank account. Can you wire? But they knew that it was a wired relationship. So they must have perhaps hacked. And so maybe a bit of step one, which is like infiltrate your computer, and then actually impersonated somebody because they had all this information. Now, it could have been an inside job on the other end as well. It was a large firm where you just kind of think that, it's like, how would anybody do that, really? You're just not expecting it. And so it's like this whole component, I think, of like being hyper aware of all things to do with money and where it is and your own security. Now, it's pretty scary stuff. How do they, let's maybe take a look at each one and talk about how we might protect ourselves from that, because this is really important because not only are our bookkeepers may be involved, and they're probably very important people in terms of helping small business owners understand these things and make sure that they're doing the right things to protect themselves. So let's maybe talk about that. Number one, get in and take your money without us knowing. How does someone do that? How do you protect yourself from that?
Great question. So there are a few different avenues for that. The first one is, establishing some sort of dual control in your financial accounts. So you're not going to authorize a transaction from only one person. There has to be a second body that goes in and also approves that transaction. You can set those up with limits. I think my bank account for my business, if I'm moving more than a couple $1,000s, it requires two of us to authorize that. The other one is just to make it harder for people to get into your accounts, period. And probably the most effective and cost-effective measure there is multi-factor authentication. Make them have two different things to get into your environment. What MFA looks at is, they're for authentication, you're either looking at something you are, so that's like biometrics, your fingerprints, your retina, that's something that you are and that can't change. Something like a password, or some sort of passphrase or key, or something that you have, which is, like a physical key or like a token or a YubiKey or something like that. You want to establish two methods there to authenticate. And that's going to cut down on probably, 2/3 of this altogether. But the other thing that I would say is just enabling or taking advantage of some of the different tools and technology that's out there to help detect when someone is inside your environment. That is the thing that I see the most. A lot of these cyber criminals operate out of, underdeveloped or third world countries, where if they're able to extract a couple $1,000s from you, that could fund them for an entire year. And so they're able to invest a lot of time into reconnaissance, and they may be inside your environment for days or weeks or even months before they seize the opportunity to actually go in and steal from you. I saw that scenario with a small business owner a couple years ago where someone got access to his Microsoft account, and with that, they got access to his email and his calendar. They waited for him to go on vacation. They had access to his calendar, so they knew. And they actually, while he was on vacation, they had discovered the credentials to his 401k plan. And they went into his 401k account and took out a hardship withdrawal for 50% of the total value of his 401k, and had that transferred out while he was on vacation, and they knew he wouldn't be paying attention.
Wow, that's sad.
Devastating. It was almost $400,000 that they stole from him, and it was gone in an instant.
And he can't recover that.
No, not in that scenario. There was no way for him to recover it. The company that was managing his 401k did everything right. He had just been compromised.
Wow. It's pretty scary stuff.
There was no good way to detect it without already having some security protocols in place, and he didn't. He didn't have anything in place. This individual, he had the mindset that it's not going to happen to me.
Right.
Which is, if you think about the most common mistake that most small and mid-sized business owners make when it comes to cybersecurity, that's what it is. 100%. It's this assumption that I'm not very big, it's not going to happen to me. And so they're not doing really any security, or they're doing minimal. They're putting minimal security measures in place. And the reality is, again, a lot of these cyber criminals they're operating out of underdeveloped countries where, like, they don't have to make $1 million. If they make a couple $1,000s, that's a big payoff for them. And ultimately, like, they're not stupid. They're very sophisticated, and they understand that, if they're only targeting, large Fortune 500 companies, those companies are doing the most to protect themselves. And the companies that, are smaller, they may only have 15 FTE. Those organizations are a lot less likely to be protecting themselves. So it's kind of like the thought process of, what do you see get robbed more, the bank or a gas station? Well, the bank surely has more money, and the payoff would be much larger if they rob the bank, but your likelihood of success is a lot lower for robbing the bank. On the other hand, gas stations get robbed all the time. They may only get what's in the register, but they know that they're going to get it. So that's why they target, those organizations that don't have as many security protocols in place.
Wow. It's really remarkable to think that this is going on, but we know that it is, and it's only going to get worse.
Unfortunately, yes.
And so the second one is a situation where they're going to trick us.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to trick us, and I've heard of that, and I've had people try to trick me as well, and they can be pretty good at it. What is it that people should be aware of when it comes to number two?
Yeah, great question again. This one almost, universally comes down to social engineering. That's what they're trying to do, and the social engineering it's a trick as old as time. We've all heard of the Trojan horse story. That was social engineering. In fact, it may be one of the first, really well documented examples of it, and people still do that today. A very common scam that's going around right now is the toll scam. I don't know if you've heard about this, but
I get it. It's like I get one every day.
I was about to say, you've probably got a text message about it saying that you have an unpaid toll, and it gives you a link to click for you to go in and pay the toll. Well, what you're going to do is you're going to go in and you're going to give your credit card number. They've tricked you into paying this toll that you think you may owe. There's a sense of urgency because you don't want to get the fine for not having paid the toll, so you go in and pay it. And so in that scenario, yeah, they're just kind of social engineering you into giving them your credit card number, and then they can go in and steal a lot more money out of it. Even if they're not targeting you via text, oftentimes people will target you via email, where they'll ask you to, log into Microsoft or log into this account, and you're not really logging into that account. You're logging in something else, and that grants them access either to your financial account, or it grants them access to, something else inside your environment that's going to allow them to extract some funds from you. One of the other really common things that we see right now is they basically, these criminals will insert themselves into an existing email conversation. So they have some sort of insider either on your side or on the person that you're exchanging information with side. And I saw this with a client last year. They got an email, or they were in the middle of an email exchange with a vendor that they owed about $150,000 to. And they got an email with new banking instructions on where to wire that money. They wired the $150,000 to their vendor, and later discovered that that email had not actually come from the vendor. It was impersonating the vendor. And they sent $150,000 to someone else.
That's the one that I've seen recently, and it sounds very similar to that. How do they do that?
Oftentimes what they're going to do is they're going to impersonate things inside of the email header. And that can get a little bit technical, but basically you can go in and you can say or present as being someone that you're not, or they'll even register a similar domain. That's something that is very, very common. So, instead of, registering entoosecurity.com, they may register entoosecurity.com with a typo in it somewhere that you wouldn't necessarily notice. And then so it looks like the email is coming from me. Even when you look at it at a glance, but in reality, it's a domain that's just been designed to impersonate me.
And so how do they get inside of a conversation? Because that's the case. It's like there's this back and forth happening around paying a bill, and then all of a sudden, boom, they pop in and go, "Oh, can you send it to this account instead?" Which that's going to catch people off guard pretty easily.
Very easily. So there's a couple different methods to do that. Either they're intercepting the traffic because it's unencrypted. So if you're not using a VPN or your vendor is not using a VPN, you've got some, inherently insecure conversations going on, and the method for, communicating is insecure. They can insert themselves right in the middle of that conversation. Or one or both of the parties has been compromised. So either my company or your company's been compromised, and they can go in and then wait for the opportune time to insert themselves in that conversation.
Very interesting. So once they're in and moving around, they can just pop up and.
One of my colleagues saw a situation a couple years ago where basically someone went in and they were waiting for an opportunity to impersonate the CEO of this other company, and they were monitoring all their email. And so they were in the CEO of this company's email, and they basically had a rule set up that any email that came in from this client moved to trash, so he never even saw it. And
Wow.
and so they inserted themselves that way. So he was none the wiser that all these conversations were going on, because even when somebody did specifically email him, they had been into his email and set up a rule that all those emails went to trash. And so he was none the wiser. And this went on for weeks before they ended up getting paid.
Wow. That's another tricky one. And then, but you can there's probably 20 different ways they could do these different things where they're actually tricking us. And then the ransomware, the third one, where they're actually scorched earth. Tell us more about that scorched earth one. This one sounds bad.
It is. And this is typically going to be the most devastating for organizations. And so at this point, what they go in and do is they're usually going to take a lot of data and download it. And so they have access to your financial records, your client's financial records, and they use that as, a mechanism for holding you ransom. Or they go in and they encrypt it all so you can't access it anymore. And at that point, they basically say, hey, we've got all this data. It's all encrypted. You'll never get it again unless you pay us, $50,000 in Bitcoin or $100,000 in Bitcoin or $1 million in Bitcoin. And then oftentimes the numbers do go up that high. And so they've basically crippled, your ability to operate. Sometimes they'll go in and they'll deface your website, or they'll completely take your website down. They'll take control of all your email. They'll take control of the critical applications that you need to maintain business operations. And they are essentially holding all that hostage until you pay them. The tricky part here, there's a few tricky parts. Number one, decrypting information is not nearly as quick or easy as encrypting information. So, they're typically not doing this in the safest manner. They know that they have to do it quickly, and because they want to stay undetected. So sometimes that data is never recoverable. Even if it is, it's going to take days or weeks or sometimes even months for you to be able to resume business operations. And then there's also the fact that you're dealing with criminals. So you have to kind of hope and pray that they're actually going to do what they say they're going to do. That they're going to give you the keys to decrypt everything after you pay them, and that doesn't always happen. In fact, it's very common for that not to happen. And then even if you do pay, you're 93% more likely to get held ransom again if you've already paid once. Because they know that, hey, this is
Why would you go anywhere else when you know you got a great customer?
Absolutely. This well has water.
Yeah.
So let's keep going back to it. And it puts organizations in a really bad situation. So there was a company, they're in the UK, called Knights of the Old. They were a transportation and logistics company. They had been in business for 158 years. They had almost 1,000 employees. They got held ransom back in late 2023. And it was a Russian state-backed ransomware gang, and they were asking them for millions of dollars. They didn't pay, but they also realized that their data was never going to be able to be recovered. regardless of whether they paid or not, because of the way that the data had been encrypted, it was gone. And their business operations were down and they were never able to recover. Again, almost 1,000 FTE in business for almost 160 years. And they were brought down to their knees and eventually bankrupted by ransomware.
Wow, it's terrible. So these are the big ones, and we can, it's pretty grim. What do we do in terms of starting to maybe assess ourselves, assess the firm, and start to identify ways to find where we're vulnerable and put into place things that will protect us?
Yeah, so there is actually a blueprint out here for just that. And it's the FTC Safeguards Rule. The FTC, they've put together a list of requirements, one of which is a risk assessment. And they basically, they want you to go through and they want you to identify, these are all my assets. This is how I make money. These are what my critical business operations are. And then here are the biggest threats in my environment. And then their requirement says that you will design an information security program around that risk assessment. So that anytime that we're involved in an engagement with a new client, that's the first thing that we want to do is we want to go in and we want to understand a little bit more about the business, do some fact finding to find out how it operates today, what their goals and strategies are, and then what's most critical for them to generate revenue and maintain operations, because those are the things that you need to prioritize first.
Gotcha. And so you put this together, and once that's figured out, you've mentioned tools and security measures that you can implement to be compliant with this. What are some of those that people would start to implement?
Yeah, so there are several kind of key components of the FTC Safeguards Rule, and most of those are kind of focused around either processes, tools, or technologies that you should implement. So, the first one again is this risk assessment.
Yep.
You have to complete it, and then they want you to take that risk assessment and turn it into an information security plan. And that information security plan needs to be overseen and maintained and implemented by someone what the FTC calls as a qualified individual. And so they're basically saying this is someone who has security expertise, who understands how to actually implement all this. They're the ones who are going to be responsible for maintaining and implementing and executing on this plan. But then after that, there are a few different things that you want to put in place. One of which is, again, this multi-factor authentication that we talked through. You need to have identity management in place. So understanding, who has access to the different applications and software inside of your environment and how do they get in. You need to have an inventory of your assets. So that's physical assets, that's the software that you use, and it's also your data. So understand what you have, what it is, and where it is. You need to encrypt your data. So whether it's in storage, on SharePoint or in some backup solution, it needs to be encrypted, but also when it's in transit. So if you're communicating from you to one of your clients, the data needs to be encrypted while it moves across the web. Principal of least privilege, making sure that people don't have access to more than they need to have access to in order to do their job. You also need to control and limit both physical access to files and also logical access. So you don't give access to all your data to every person in your organization, maybe, particularly if they don't all need it. Logging and monitoring. So having tools in place that identify what's happening in your environment and are going to monitor that for abnormalities and then alert you when things look a little suspicious. And then probably the biggest one is policies and procedures. And that goes around education. So you need to identify how you want your business to operate securely, put that in writing, and then communicate that out to your workforce and say, this is what right looks like. This is how we're going to do business and how we're going to operate here. And then consistently reinforce that message.
It's a lot.
It is, and to that point, this is the conversation I typically have with organizations is you ask about, regulatory requirements like this or just cybersecurity in general. And oftentimes they feel like they're in a pretty good spot because they have, like a Norton antivirus or something like that. And that's not sufficient in today's environment. Ransomware and cybercrime, if you look over the last 3 years, it's increased 600%. And, with the rise of AI making tools and social engineering cheaper and faster than it's ever been before, that number's not going to go down. It's just going to go up. So, there are blueprints out there for success, but typically, a lot of small and mid-sized organizations aren't using them because that's not the business that they're in. If you're a bookkeeper, you're focused on bookkeeping. You're not focused on cybersecurity. And so when you try to take that on as an owner or a manager or, a senior leader in the organization, it's just too much because it's two distinctly different jobs. And most people aren't able to do both successfully at the same time.
That's absolutely right. And so this is part of the FTC Safeguards Rule. There's probably some consequences of not complying with these rules as well.
There are. Like anything else, it's fines is the first thing that the FTC likes to go to. So they can impose fines up to $100,000 for each violation. And that includes fines of $10,000 to individual officers of the company for each violation. But, I always look at fines as that's a secondary thing. I mean, nobody wants to get fined, but, oftentimes
you don't want to be ransomware either. that's the bigger issue, right?
You can work with a regulator, and as long as you can show that, hey, I was doing the right things to try and get better. Like I was taking this seriously. I may not have had everything implemented and been 100% compliant, but, progress is defensible. But you're not going to be able to work with a cyber criminal. And so the ransomware, like that's not going to get you fined. That's probably going to take down your business. And you're gonna lose your business and go out of business. And so to me, the fine consequences, I mean, that's a bad day, but that's not the worst day. The worst day is when, your company.
Yeah, it's kind of like the seatbelt, getting a ticket for not wearing your seatbelt, right? It's like that's the least your worries. You want to be strapped in as you're going 120 down the highway with your family.
Absolutely. You think about all the time and effort and the blood, sweat, and tears that we all go through to build our own business. And it's like having another child sometimes. It's a huge portion of your life and it can just disappear in an instant. It's terrifying.
Yeah, it is. It is. So tell us how you help people deal with this.
Yeah, so my company, this is one of our, I would say, maybe even not one of it, is our main focus is we do FTC Safeguards Rule compliance for accounting firms, tax firms, and bookkeeping firms. They're all under the guise of the FTC in this rule. They all have to comply. And so we've built a compliance program that is specifically designed for this. We will act as your qualified individual. We'll build your security program. We already have the tools and technologies in place to do all the things that you need to do. We already know how to implement it. We have policies that are in place, and basically you pay a monthly fee per seat and you come into our program. And so we are your cybersecurity department. Whereas a big company would have, 10 or 15 or 20 people on staff that maintain their security posture. We do that for you, and we do it at scale. So we can take on, whether it be sole proprietors, we can take that on. Or if you've got, a couple hundred people that work for you, we can take that on as well. And you come under our umbrella. and we handle all your cybersecurity needs for you. There are a lot of time-boxed activities that you have to complete, once a year or once every other year. We have that all kind of scheduled out and put on a regular cadence. There are also time-boxed activities around reporting to the board of directors or the, senior leaders in the organization to provide updates on the cyber program. We have that all built in as well. And then if, God forbid there is some sort of cyber incident, they call us, or we have a 24/7, 365 security operations center that's monitoring your environment full time. When they pick up the phone and they have someone to call, they call me. They don't call you. You get a phone call from me letting you know that something happened, but we took care of it.
Beautiful. That sounds like a great service for something that is probably very challenging to understand, at the very basic level, but as well the nuances being so great across all of the things that you've explained today. A very useful service.
I like to think so. And in the bookkeeping world, bookkeepers are in the same type of business. Where you don't have the expertise to manage your books on your own, or the time, or that's just not the business that you're in. So you outsource it to someone else who can manage it at scale and provide you with a higher level of service than you could ever afford to do on your own. We have the exact same business model.
Fantastic. Well, this has been a sobering conversation, and fortunately, there's people like you that are becoming experts and becoming the going concern for dealing with these things. It's a shame we have to have a whole industry there to protect us from criminals, but that is the case. And like anything, a pickpocket targets people that are, merrily doing their day, and it's been happening for centuries, and since there were humans, likely someone was taking advantage of people, and so now it's being done digitally and without your knowledge in many cases. So fantastic that you're one of the people that can help put an end to this, or at least protect those willing to go and do the work that's needed in order to protect themselves. If people wanted to learn more about you, Nick, where would they go to do that?
Yeah, so you can go on our website. It's entoosecurity.com. Now that's Entoo spelled ENTOO, security.com. Or you can also find me on LinkedIn. You can search for Nick Mullen. I'm not the best looking one that's going to come up, but I'm one of the top ones. So pretty easy to find.
Perfect. Well, there's a few ways, and we'll have those links in the show notes for sure. And want to thank you for coming on the show and sharing your expertise.
Michael, thanks so much for having me.
The pleasure has been all ours. And with that, we wrap another episode of the Successful Bookkeeper podcast. To learn more about today's wonderful guest and to get access to all sorts of valuable free business building resources, you can go to thesuccessfulbookkeeper.com. Until next time, goodbye.
You've been listening to The Successful Bookkeeper with Michael Palmer. For more information and to download the resources mentioned in this episode, please visit us at thesuccessfulbookkeeper.com. Thank you for listening.